While more could have been done to improve systems like the map, trading, and optional hunts, the Zodiac Age is still a fantastic role-playing experience throughout.
Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age is nonetheless invigorating. Its epic, lore-abundant story and its time-tested Gambit system should appeal to those who missed out on Final Fantasy XII the first time around.
I can't wait. It's going to be exciting to be able to get lost into another world.
This game is crap. But seriously, what the f***? I have no problem with anyone liking a game that I don't. It's fine, crack on. I'm glad that someone out there was able to get some enjoyment out of it, because then I think to myself, well, at least it wasn't a complete disaster, and it must have some kind of value in that case. But this isn't exactly a game that isn't for me, because I've gotten much more into the Final Fantasy series, more than I previously had over the past years. I played Final Fantasy VI for the first time earlier this year, and that game was absolutely amazing. Easily one of the best single-player story experiences I've enjoyed in a while, and that game came out in 1994, so fuck me does that game hold up well. Many of you watching this right now know that I play a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and still do. I loved X's combat, and still have a semi-soft spot for that game. And while I didn't really think much of it to begin with, I am finding myself liking 7 a lot more than I did before too. It's a good game. Having said that, Final Fantasy as a series also has some shit entries in it too. 13 was an absolute train wreck, and no, I'm not going to show any footage from that game because I'd like to not get copyright claimed again, thank you very much YouTube. 15 was okay, but I couldn't wait for the main characters to just die, but mostly to have Prompto to walk off to the nearest corner, curl up there and die from sheer awkwardness, while Gladio watches on while crying, eating cup noodles, and while Ignis repeatedly keeps walking into the same wall over and over again, like a fly trying to exit a closed window before getting a concussion and proclaiming that he's come up with a new recipe. But we're not here to talk about those games, oh no siree. We're here to talk about one of the best Final Fantasy games in the series, Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age. Wait, I thought we were going to talk about a good game. No? Oh, my bad. I forget sometimes that I'm True Review, and naturally that means that this game was fucking terrible. So before we get into this possibly long and unnecessary rant, I think it's best we first consider the state of affairs in this series, considering when this game came out before we go full speed ahead. So this is the 12th game in the series, unless you want to get technical and correct me on how it's actually the 11th or possibly 8th or whatever. The last single player game to have come out before this was actually Final Fantasy X, because 11 was an MMORPG and bound to its own laws. 10 was arguably a very good game. Keep that in mind since it's going to be important soon. The next single player experience to come out after 12 was 13, arguably the worst single player experience in the series. Keep that in mind since it's also going to be important right about now. So my point being is that Final Fantasy XII is the bridge in the franchise between when the series was really good to when it was complete horseshit. And honestly I think that is reflected well in this game. Is it a terrible game? Well, no. Is it a good game? Also no. Is it worth playing? Also no. Did you actually play this game at all, True Review? Well, my Steam account is telling me that I spent a whopping 55 hours playing this game. But the answer is actually no, if you want to get technical on this. I didn't play this game, which neatly sets me up for the point of this entire rant. Never before have I ever played a game for so long, or even at all, have paid the full price for admittance, to have spent a long time going through it, unlocking new places, fighting different bosses, leveling up characters and gaining new abilities and gear, and having gotten all the way to the end of the main game and sat through the unskippable credits, I still can't rightfully say that I've played this game. I can't say that about any other game I own, except for Final Fantasy XII, and here's why. In order to count that you've actually played a game, you must have had some input in your progression. I hear a lot of people say that walking simulators don't count as games, and while I'm not claiming that Final Fantasy XII is a walking simulator by any means, well, I didn't exactly do anything during those 55 hours. True. You're kidding me, right? This is Final Fantasy we're talking about here. There's got to be tons of fights, turn-based or real-time combat involving tactics and skill, mixed with how much you've leveled. It takes you know, effort, right? Well, ordinarily I agree with you there, dear viewer. If we were talking about literally any other game in the series. But ladies and gentlemen, have I got a treat for you! Introducing the Gambit System! Fights progressing too quickly for you, or find you having to pause the game every 2 seconds to input a command is too much of a hassle? Fear not, because with the new revolutionary Gambit System, you can input commands for each of your party member before a fight even occurs. Now when you get into a fight, you can trust your party members to do the work for you. Want your healer to heal whenever someone's health drops below 50%? Just add that to their Gambit list. Want the DPS to just focus on attacking? Set them that command too, and hey presto! The only problem with this is that if you set up your Gambit system just right, and trust me, that's not hard to do, you can literally go ahead and put your controller down whenever a fight starts and just watch yourself win. Or even go AFK if you want, which I did. A lot. You see, I have a recurring problem with the Final Fantasy series in that I never know what level I have to be in order to do the next part. So Final Fantasy VII has got me into a routine of going off to grind for a bit before continuing the story because I don't want a repeat of what happened to me in Final Fantasy VII, where I got stuck down a rabbit hole with loads of enemies that were far stronger than me. But the problem with this is that now I'm going into areas extremely overpowered. In Final Fantasy VI, I defeated Kefka's final form in 3 rounds, and I did that by spamming Ultima over and over again until I won the fight. My party was level 60. Turns out that that was about 35 levels too high. To get a high enough level in Final Fantasy XII, start a fight, put the controller down, and go and slap someone who's breaking lockdown rules or whatever. Never before have I ever played a game where I've reached a boss fight and gone, oh shit, a boss fight! Better go AFK for a bit. The end of the main story involves 4 back-to-back boss fights. Here's what happened for me. First fight. I put the controller down at the start and didn't touch it until right near the very end when Basch got KO'd. I selected Fran as the new party leader, but we'd won the fight by the time I selected her. Second fight. No fucking idea what happened. I wasn't even in the room for it. I put the controller down at the start of the fight, got up, went for a piss, and by the time I came back, we'd won the fight. No idea what happened in that one. Third fight, which is the penultimate fight by the way. I think I was supposed to target the ads in the room, but getting everyone to focus on the main boss seemed to work just as well. Other than that, I didn't touch the controller. And lastly, the final boss, the hardest boss in the main story. It occurred to me at the start that I hadn't used any espers at all during the entire game unless you count that one time where you have to use one to open a door. But then I realised that out of all the party members I was using, none of them had learnt any. After realising this, I put my controller down and didn't touch it for the rest of the fight. And that's how I won the game. Yes, of course, you can just not use the Gambit system if you want, but as said, if you're going to do that, then I hope you enjoy having to pause the game every 2 seconds to input a command. I've heard other reviewers say that the Gambit system is amazing, because it's satisfying to come up with a system of tactics by combining each Gambit together and seeing your plan pay off in a fight. What, you mean the tactics of getting the healers to heal and protect while everyone else just gets set to auto-attack? Yeah, real inventive, isn't it? There's a reason why we've never seen the Gambit system ever appear again in any other titles, and that's because it's shit. And extremely easy to exploit. In fact, the game pretty much wants you to exploit it. Hey gamer, guess what? You know how you've actually had to do stuff during fights in the previous games? Well, not anymore. I could go on about some of the other gameplay features, but there's not really much to say. You've got different job systems that you can take on, and that all works fine enough, and I'm getting the faint whiffs of Final Fantasy XI from all of this. And you can go shopping for new stuff, or go on hunts for money. Alternatively, you could just AFK grind and sell all of the useless junk you get for loads of money as well, since you're gonna want to grind anyway. Okay then, but what about the story? Is it any good? Well, when it comes to story, Final Fantasy as a series does either really good stories, or stories that are confusing, complicated and crap. 6, 7, 10, kinda, and 14 all have amazing stories. Also on a quick note, I've not played 8 or 9 so I can't comment on them. 13 was a clusterfuck in terms of story, and 15 started off strong, but then turned into a road trip for the rest of the game, except for the end where it wanted to be a shit knockoff of Final Fantasy VI. 12's story, on the other hand, felt like it wanted to be more like 13. Which is weird now that I hear myself say it, because 13 wasn't even out at that point. By that I mean that it has MacGuffins and fantasy elements that tries to make out that all of these things are really important. Lady Ashe needs to find the Sun Crest in order to drive the Empire from Dalmasca, but the Alcuria, and possibly Cid as well, because he's got to be in there somewhere, wanted her to bring vengeance upon the Empire, but specifically Vinar, another immortal Alcuria, because that will restore the balance of history, and she'll achieve this through the use of all the Nethicite and the Treaty Blade as well. Meanwhile, the player is standing there taking this all in like... The plot is so all over the place. The immediate beginning is alright, and it gave me the impression that this was going to be good, but it soon begins to grind to a halt and doesn't move for a while. But when things do finally pick up, it's all mystical bullshit being made out that this is stuff we already know. Which we don't. Thane was introduced as potentially a good villain near the start, but we don't see him for much of the game until near the end. The vast majority of the characters do nothing for me, with the exception of Balthier, who was the only person in the main cast who actually had some character. Like, if we were to break down each of the main characters, here's what we get. Vaan. Essentially the main dude of the plot. Starts off as a nobody with no real goals or drive other than wanting to become a sky pirate one day and making his fortune. He has no real reason to be on this journey and even wonders out loud why he's there in the first place on several occasions. Ends the story as a nobody, but now owns a small ship. Remember when I did a rant on Limbo of the Lost, and I talked about how Neil Mates' only piece of character development was that he got burnt one time, and I said that that's not character development? Well, here we are again. Giving Vaan a ship at the end does not equal character development. Penelo. Only on this journey because she badly wants to get inside Vaan's pants. That's literally it. Ashe. The quote, "chosen, not chosen one," ends quote, who's supposed to resolve the plot essentially by herself. Or at least according to those god things anyway. Destined to be the next ruler of Rabanastra, but spends most of her time playing diplomat and not actually trying to take her rightful throne. Balthier. The only good character. A rogue personality since he's a sky pirate who just wants to get paid. His primary motivation for getting on board here is with the intention of getting paid in fat stacks until he realises, to his own surprise, that he actually has a heart of gold and would rather see Evilis, check me out using another name that probably means nothing to you, welcome to Final Fantasy XII, now go look up a wiki. Would rather see Evilis prosper and its people live freely than get annihilated from crossfire between two wars. Makes light of the situation on several occasions and often calls things out for what they truly are. Fran. Balthier's sidekick who might actually be 500 years for all we know. Banished from her forest because of reasons, and I would go into more detail about this, but the game assured me that it's not important. You get a whole section on Fran's origins, and the outcome of it is, well, we'll tell you later. Maybe. Probably not though. Barsh. Warrior whose brother was a traitor to Dalmasca, but not really. Fanatically loyal to the Dalmascan throne, but ends the story as head of security to the Imperial throne. How the f*** did that happen again? I get the morals, I really do, and fair enough, but you can't serve two states at once. He's doing it to protect Dalmasca from within the Empire by serving the new Emperor who's all soft and cuddly compared to his dick brother, but the Imperials got their shit squared away after Vane dies anyway, so what the hell? But yeah, those are your party members. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity in this rant to go off on a kind of related rant about the story, or at least what I hear other people say about it, and that's that the story in this game is good because it's a lot like Star Wars. I've seen people argue this from all sides about it. People who like this game and say that it's like Star Wars, people who don't like this game and say that it's not, people who do like it and say that it's not, etc. And I can see why people are making that claim if you're prepared to get into this. I mean, are you? Well, we're doing it anyway. So the similarities begin like this. Vaan and Luke are both nobodies who go on a fantastic adventure and get into trouble with the Empire as a result. They both team up with the roguelike character and his humanoid animal companion, who are both on the other side of the law, as well as with a princess who has lost her seat of power to the Empire in one way or another. It turns out that the big bad is using an ancient power to become more powerful, though is being influenced by the darker side of it, and it's now up to the good guys to choose whether to fight fire with fire or to do the honourable thing. This culminates in a high-stakes, high-tech airship battle at the end, where the good guys attempt to destroy the enemy superweapon before the good guys' home gets destroyed. That's the comparison people are making, but I'm arguing from the point that Final Fantasy XII is nothing like Star Wars, so with that said... Vaan and Luke. Both have humble beginnings and want to go on an adventure since their lives are boring, but that's where the similarities end. Luke starts off as a complete novice, but with the help of Obi-Wan, he is able to tap into a power he never knew he had before, and it is this power that essentially wins the day in Episode 4. In Episode 5, we see him getting stronger and taking on much more of a critical role in the rebellion, but ultimately loses to the big bads when he becomes worried for his friends and lets overconfidence get in the way. By the time we get to the final film, we've seen him achieve the highest level of power and skill and is able to deal with most of his foes. His resolves are tested near the end and even succumbs to the dark side for a moment before realising that he's better than that and that history is starting to repeat itself, leading to the big bad's redemption arc to be concluded. He has clear motivations and goals for joining the rebellion, first by the way of adventure, then by the death of his family, then again with the death of his new father figure, and finally with the revelation that Darth Vader is in fact his father. This is all stuff you can't exactly walk away from, and it ties Luke to the plot. Vaan, on the other hand, constantly wonders why he's on this adventure in the first place. He's literally there because he has nothing better to do. He grew up during the war and has lived under Imperial occupation for a time, but that's not really affected his life that much. And while Luke was central to the Empire's downfall, Vaan's presence didn't change much during this rebellion, to the point where the story starts putting him in the back of the screen because more important people have things to say. As said earlier, his only character development is him getting a ship, and that's it. Luke's character is completely transformed by the end of Return of the Jedi, from a moisture farmer's apprentice in Episode 4 to the most powerful warrior and saviour of the galaxy in Episode 6. Vaan goes from a nobody to a nobody with a small ship. Balthier and Han Solo. There are more similarities here, but I'd still argue that they're not the same. Both are rogues who start off with only their own interests at heart, and both get caught up in something greater than themselves. Here they learn that there's more to life than just getting paid, and they are able to find something far more valuable than gold. Except Balthier doesn't! Han finds love during his adventure as well as the bond between his friends, but Balthier gets none of that. He doesn't find true love, though he wasn't exactly looking for it. However, neither was Han. He risks his life to save Rabanastra near the end, but instead of celebrating the team's successes after winning, him and Fran steal the ship back off of Vaan and fuck off. Han Solo becomes famous on a galactic scale after Episode 6 and settled down to start a family with Leia. He got something valuable out of it, including the journey itself. Balthier's actions at the end of Final Fantasy XII suggests to me that all he wanted to do was wrap things up as quickly as he could to go back to mugging people. Fran and Chewbacca. The furry sidekick to the rogue. Fran has more of an input in dialogue than Chewie, mainly because all Wookiees can offer is "Aaah!" Both hail from the forest, and both shoot stuff and can fly ships. And while we don't get any backstory for Chewbacca, well, at least not until Episode 3, and then again in Solo, we do get a little bit for Fran. The problem with this, though, is that we get just enough information to walk away with more questions than answers. In one cutscene, Vaan asks Fran how old she really is, since it's hinted that her race can live for a very, very long time. The party's response to this is to scoff at him for asking a woman how old she was. Oh sure, okay then. Dangle that carrot in front of my face and then criticise me for trying to grab it. Sure, my bad. We learned that Wookiees don't like losing games and will react quite violently if they do, but we're not going to talk about Viera biology? Fine, whatever. Other than that, Fran doesn't offer much. She's mainly there to add glamour to Balthier, even though he's got enough personality as it is, while Chewbacca became one of sci-fi movies' most beloved mascots. Need I say more? Ash and Leia. Both are princesses who have lost their seat of power and who generally wants the Empire to fuck off. But that's where their similarities end. Leia is a fiery character who, I'd like to point out, at one time, managed to break herself out of prison during her own prison rescue. She's known to take command of military operations despite not having the authority to do so, with results, and generally seems to be very goal-focused and doesn't let much get in the way of what she's trying to do, except on occasion when Han Solo sticks his tongue down her throat. Ash, on the other hand, spends her time trying to obtain different MacGuffins that will grant her power since only she can use it, or when she's not doing this, she's seen the ghost of her dead husband who is actually a manipulative astral projection from the gods not gods, still don't know what they are. Leia comes across as the type of person who will boot anyone up the arse who's in need of a boot up the arse. Ash comes across as if she needs a day off. By the end of Return of the Jedi, Leia is hailed as a war hero and secures a future in politics, being loved by complete strangers as well as the people who know her. Ash ends up on the throne, but no one goes to see her anymore. None of that weird interaction we got in Attack on Titan where Historia takes the throne and it's like, so do we still call you by your first name or do we have to call you Your Highness now? Nope, none of that. The party disbands and goes right back to what they were doing at the start. Fuck you, Ash, enjoy your lonely life at the top. Then there's the final battle at the end with that really long but cool cutscene, which was ruined for me when I realised that I could have just watched this on YouTube and not had to pay for the pleasure. But this part wasn't like the end of Return of the Jedi either. Balthier gives Vaughn control of the ship and instructs him to fly it just like he showed him, despite him never actually showing him how to fly it. Yeah, that must have happened during the loading screen or some shit. Everyone else goes on board the biggest ship and kills Vane while I was AFK, as I said before. Also, there's no redemption arc. Vane doesn't turn good or even show signs of turning good, so no, he's not like Darth Vader in the slightest. Everyone then leaves except for Balthier and Fran, who tries to move the ship before it lands on Rabanastra, and you think they might have died, but no, they're fine. I don't recall the Death Star potentially crashing into the main Rebel base in Episode 6, and I don't recall Han and Chewie ever going into the Death Star in Episode 6 either. They were too busy fighting with puppets in the woods against the Empire to do that. And they all had a little party at the end too. Star Wars also had the extra impact of Darth Vader returning to the light near the end, adding a bittersweet element to their victory. If you include Bash working for the Empire at the end, then yes, it's exactly the same as Star Wars, in that it's nothing remotely like Star Wars, so stop claiming this the same, because it's not. Anyway, I've not even brought up Larsa once during this rant. Well, that's not technically true. Who is the younger brother of the big bad who tags along with you for some of your journey and seems legit, but he's about as dense as a neutron star, which leads me neatly onto True Reviews best line.
Researchers from the Draclaw laboratory. What were they doing here?
Research.
I mean, I don't even know what sort of answer you're expecting from that, Larsa. You answered your own question. What are you going to ask next? Where the International Space Station is? I legitimately lost my shit when I heard this line. Bravo, Balthier. I am glad someone on the writing team for this game understood how fucking stupid that question was. Now, that's not to say that this is all the game has to offer. As said, there are optional hunts you can do to earn more money, but as said, I don't think it's necessary to earn money, since you're going to be earning money from loot from grinding anyway. There are other maps and places to visit, enemies to battle, and bosses to fight if you want to AFK those as well. Although having said that, I did a little bit of extra content near the end, where I got to this one place that used to be a city, but it's been dead for a while, and Bush literally turns to me and says there's no point in being here and we should just not bother and turn back. And I was tempted to take him up on that offer, but I proceeded on. In hindsight, I should have listened to him, because apart from an optional boss that I AFK'd, there was really nothing there for me. And so, in conclusion, because this video is going on for far too long, with all that said, I ask you this. Did I even play this game? What's the difference between playing this game and watching a Let's Play? I'll tell you the difference. £17.49 on Steam. That's the difference, but you're getting the same experience. So ultimately, I'm telling you to save your £17.49 and just watch a Let's Play of it instead if you're really that interested, because you're getting the exact same experience anyway. Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age, which is the remastered version by the way, I probably should have said that at the start, has a lackluster story and a core gameplay mechanic that is designed to play the game for you. There are even videos on YouTube you can look up on how to get your entire party to level 99, and you don't even have to be in the house to do it! Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age. More like Final Fantasy XII, your presence is not required. In conclusion, Final Fantasy XII The Zodiac Age is a refreshing remastered version of a beloved title that holds up well today and is a great addition to the Final Fantasy series. Also, fuck this game.